Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat here. I'm today doing my review of Made in Abyss Season 2, Episode 9 that aired this past Saturday night on Toonami. So I'll say the things I liked about this episode, some of the things I didn't like about this episode, and then tie it up with a big old-fashioned Super Orange Cat bow right at the end. Now let's go into some of the things I really liked about this episode, and for this, I'm going to skip right to the end of this episode here, and it is the best moment of this episode was Faputa's monologue at the end. Go back and rewatch it because as much as we really haven't seen that much of Faputa as a character, she lays down what could very easily be seen as her thesis statement right here and there. She doesn't really exist for herself, and moments where she seems to be her own character are very brief and short-lived. Like, for example, the whole gag at the start of this episode where, like, Faputa was getting Reg to scratch her. Outside of moments like that, most of her character has been this preoccupation with this one goal to destroy Ilbu and everyone inside it. In short, to basically put her own mother out of her misery by ending her in that way. In her speech, where I can't remember the exact wording, but it's stuff like, "You have fed your mouths on my mother. I will not forgive you for that. You have, like, lived and you have caused my mother pain. I will not forgive you for that." Like, stuff like that. It was, like, so well scripted, in my opinion. It had all the feels of Faputa, who, for forever, we don't know an exact time frame, probably almost 150 years since we had Wazukayan early in this episode, imply it's been 150 years since Ilbu was founded, and that she's been almost rehearsing this in her head over and over and over again, waiting for an opportunity that she finally got thanks to Reg's incinerator to be able to enter Ilbu and do what she's been compelled to do ever since she was born. And I really feel like that's, even though we haven't seen much of a character arc of Faputa, it feels like a well-deserved build-up and climax point we reached at the end of this episode. And again, and Faputa is slowly becoming my favorite Season 2 character. She's getting up there. She's getting dangerously close to surpassing Ma, in my opinion. And then I guess after that, a somewhat far-off third place is Vuko. And then I guess everyone else is after that. Outside of those three characters, no one has really stood out to me in a way. Another thing I really liked about this episode, it's a little sight gag you see towards the start of this episode. So at the start of the episode, you have Vuko kind of hiding out in the shadows a bit because, again, there's multiple people in this village that are the original people that were part of her core group that she traveled with, and she did not want them to see her. However, if you remember the very end of the last episode, they showed some of the images of some of the travelers and what they became, like what hollows they became. If you notice, right behind Vuko in this one scene, I almost used the picture for it, but like it was a web pea, and web peas suck and all. And had her, like this blue-haired girl with one eye, just in the background. And you can tell the moment she looks around and recognizes Vuko, but doesn't say anything because of how everyone knew about the whole, Vuko kind of tried to betray us at the end here by offing herself. So, like, she doesn't want to say anything, but she recognizes and is, like, kind of happy to see Vuko again after all this time. And it's one of those things that they do a good job of showing without saying anything. And also, you had the moment when Wazukayan immediately recognizes Vuko and starts kind of acting like nothing happened. It's like, oh, like Vuko's doing this, like, oh crap, here he is, slowly turn around, slowly walk away. He's like, oh, Vuko, it's been a while. You know you're wearing underwear on your head, right? Like stuff, moments like that. And especially considering that he ends up screwing her over. We saw a couple episodes ago, last episode actually, he's the one that screwed her over and locked her in goo prison with all of the dead babies. Imagine an anime where you can actually say that sentence and have it make sense like this one. And then you kind of get this weird moment where it implies he's still got a malicious intent for Vuko, where he kind of like grabs her and takes her up to a higher spot. But at the same time, he's able to explain a way of, oh, you don't want to be in Geronimo's way, do you? Geronimo, the super monster you see in this episode, that could more or less command the balancing that we already know is all of Iramui's dead children and launched them at things, in which Reg was able to eventually stop using his incinerator, which blew open the hole that gave Faputa the chance that she's been looking forward to for more than a century. And this is an episode that's really good in the way in which things are put together. And I know I mentioned, like, oh, a couple really great moments in the episode, but it's one of those, it's very high rewatchability because everything makes sense. It didn't feel like the show was trying to do an ass pull in any way. And in a very action heavy episode like this one, especially from the context of Reg, you get this interesting moment here. You get this little interesting chain of events that finally gave Faputa the opening she's been looking for. They didn't like say anything like, oh, or anything cheap like, oh, because part of Faputa has gone through, now all of Faputa can go through or something. They actually had to do something that made sense within the realm, that being Reg's incinerator can basically rewrite the rules of the Abyss. It doesn't just blow holes in things, it rewrites the rules. It screws up the whole firmament of like the strains of ascending and stuff too. So the whole shield around Ilbu gets punched through. And I like how that was set up. And again, and this is an episode I'm really looking forward to. The next episode, especially with the little twist ending we got where we revealed that Belov actually never killed Nanachi. He just put Nanachi into a deep sleep where he fed him his own memories of the Ganja suicide core. Because if you remember, Belov, outside of Vuko, was the only character in this group that really felt like anything was kind of screwy with this. Like, he was the one panicking because he realized, yeah, he's been eating the dead babies of Iramui, who's a young girl who's only having his babies because of this weird cradle desire thing. And he's freaked out by this. And you had the previous episode, Wazo Kaion's like, oh, it's because you're of nobility. You're not used to this like hard knock stuff we have to do. And then you even have Belov offering to sacrifice himself, but instead he gets turned into the giant snake thing. It'll be interesting to see what Faputa deems worthy to live. Like, almost certainly she'll spare Reg because of he's the only reason why she is able to get here. And also, since she talks specifically about the villagers, whom she might spare is people who she doesn't identify as villagers. So possibly, like, really outside of that, it would just be Rico, of the people she might know about. She might not know about Nanachi not being a villager. It'd be interesting because Vuko she'll almost certainly spare because that was the only person that ever tried to alleviate her mother's pain in any way. And maybe Belov? It'll be interesting because he's definitely part of the Ganja suicide core, but he's the only person that ever seemed repentant outside of Vuko of what happened to Iramui. So it'll be interesting to see what Faputa thinks about that. And again, next episode's setting up amazingly because you get this little twist ending where Nanachi isn't really dead. And then you get this whole thing of Faputa finally, after all this time, getting her revenge, which I think Made in Abyss is set up amazingly. Which makes it all the more baffling that when I looked, because after like last week's episode, for the first time, I actually looked up what the general reception of the season was. Like, the general anime reception was, well, it's a sequel season. It's not bad, but it's not the first season quality, which to a degree I understand and I kind of believe as well. If I had to rate season 1 versus season 2, I'm still putting season 1 a step ahead of this season. But there's some other people, especially like in the general Toonami fan base, that hate this show. And I mean people who turned on the second season here. And I can go into the myriad of reasons why. And if I do like a wrap-up season 2 video, like at the end of the season, I'll probably go into more detail about that. I was kind of surprised. I love this season. I love the show. This season so far has probably been like a nice 8 out of 10 for me. This episode was like an 8.5 out of 10 for me. Very solid. And it sets up the final 3 episodes extremely well, in my opinion. What are your guys' opinions? Leave your comments, leave your opinions down below. I am the Super Orange Cat, and that is all.